Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our live webinar called Learning How to Create Engaging Activities Using Robotics for Early Learners. Apologize for the wait. We're just getting set up, getting some technical things ready to go. Let's check our poll results to see what we have for as far as teachers. Oh, so we have a fair amount of teachers that are teaching multiple grade levels or maybe older educators, which is perfectly okay. We do have a little bit of a mix, but we're going to scroll to the next slide here, and just to kind of give us an introduction to what we're going to be doing today. So I'd like to start off with talking about education just in general, how it's transforming. And it's not just because of the current situation that we're currently in or distance learning. It is more due to the fact that education is getting more and more technical because of the advancements of technology, just in general, right? So when we talk about technology as it continues to grow, we have to continue to have that blended learning approach. We have to marry that digital component to that hands-on, because that is what students are really looking for, to be able to make those concrete, tangible connections that we sometimes are not able to do so unless we have something concrete. Me personally, I'm more of a visual learner. So as long as I see it, I'm actually writing down notes, I retain that information. And there's other students as well. And there's different modalities of learning. So we kind of have to be cognizant of that as we're actually talking about that. And then we also know, as we've probably experienced today, at least I have, internet connection issues, right? We're continuously having to deal with that. So we have to be proactive and have some kind of backup plan just in case something happens. I know in certain circumstances too, we're delivering materials to our students' houses just to make sure that they have what they need for the week, or they're coming to school to be able to connect to the internet, right? So there's a lot of different circumstances, and we totally understand that. And then also the last thing I wanted to talk about was that there's a lot of changes happening, and sometimes it's very difficult to adapt to more or less the new norm, right? So budgets issues, there's new tools that sometimes we'll have to learn, and sometimes these are things out of our control. So we really want to stay grounded and focus on things that you can control, and then you're able to sometimes alleviate some of that stress, because there's a lot of uncertainty yet. We don't know if we're going to be distance full until the next year. We don't know how that's going to impact us in the next coming month. There's a lot of speculation around that. So stay focused and stay grounded on things that you can control. And that sometimes helps you with some of that different kind of stressful situations that you would normalize wouldn't want to be in. So let's talk about the agenda today. So we're going to talk about the introduction to coding engineering. This is going to be kind of more or less a quick overview. Some of you already know this. That's great, but I might touch on some points that maybe you might not have heard of, and that's okay. We're going to be mainly focusing on Matatalab. So that's what I have out here in front of me, but I'm definitely going to talk about different examples that you can use that doesn't necessarily require a product either. So we're going to stay tuned to that. And then we're going to talk about some different competitions, activities that you can do, whether language arts, math, science, etc., that are incorporating some of these engineering tasks. And then we're going to leave it up to some Q&A at the very end. And I definitely want you to be more interactive. So if I'm demonstrating something, or if I speak something too quickly, let me know, and I'll try to address that as I can, because I have my laptop off to the side that I can see your questions throughout this webinar. So let's jump to the introduction to engineering, the next slide. So one of the main questions that I really want to address first and foremost is, what is an engineer? And if you ask an engineer this, you're going to have different answers, right? So it might be the skills or the technical things that they do, from building and implementing or solving a problem, problem solving. There's a lot of different skills that they might do. They also might talk about the different engineers out there: civil engineer, biomedical engineering, nuclear engineering. There's a lot of different aspects to engineering. So when you're giving this definition to your students, you really want to hone in and focus on the fact that there is an engineer in everything that we do, everything around us, everything that we wear has been engineered because there's been a need to fulfill that, or there's been a want to fulfill that. So engineering is all around us, and when we define engineering, we have to really be honed in onto that definition and understanding that it does touch everything in our lives, from what we do and what we use, especially with technology. So we'll be discussing what engineer design cycle, also known as the EDC. Now, there's other names out there: engineer design process, But essentially there's kind of like a process or like steps. I don't want to refer to them as steps because it's not linear, but it's more of like a process of how we would actually solve a problem, right? So there's the ask phase. The ask phase is more or less you're defining your problem. What are we trying to solve? And when I explain this, I try to give like a real world example to our students, right? So for me, a real world problem was, hey, I got to paint my rooms. I just got a house. I don't like the colors. I got to paint my house. So if I were going through this process with the students, I would say, okay, my first problem is I have to paint this room, right? I don't know where to start, right? So the next phase is to imagine, well, what are we going to paint it, right? So we have to do some research on the colors. We have to do some research on the different qualities of paint. If I'm painting in the bathroom, maybe I have to have a different kind of quality paint than I would if I'm painting in the living room. If it has a lot of sun or no sun. So I have to do all this different research, and that's what the imagine phase is. Then you got the planning phase. So now I have to start planning, okay, how much paint do I need? If I'm going to be painting along the windowsill, I'm going to actually have to come up with a plan not to actually paint the windowsill itself, right? The frame of it. So there's a lot of different things in the planning, and that's like your prototyping phase. And then you get into creating your prototype. That's where you actually get to build. So you actually buy the paint, you start painting, you start actually doing the actual project itself. Then you get into the improve stage. Well, now that we've painted this whole room, we might look at it and just be like, that is not what we wanted or intended. Maybe we didn't get those swabs of paint just to see what we wanted, or we put it up and we thought, oh, that looks great. Then when we painted the whole room, we're like, oh my gosh, that's horrible. Maybe it needs a second coat or what, you know. So all those improving phases that go with it. And then we get to share at the very end. The sharing phase is kind of nice because then it allows students to see other people's innovation and creativity and what they're doing. I sometimes make it like a challenge, like a Shark Tank, where, you know, all these different students have this opportunity to say, yeah, my design is the best and this is the reason why. So there's a lot of different phases. So the ask, imagine, plan, create, improve, and share, these are all different steps, but they're not necessarily linear, right? And we just naturally, organically do this day in to day out. And I can give you an example of that. So when, as adults, we're trying to solve a problem, say we go in the kitchen, we see the peanut butter jar out. Well, I know that the peanut butter jar is not supposed to be out, right? I'm gonna put it away. So I go and I put it away, but wait a minute, where is the cap? I don't know where the cap is. So my first instinct is, okay, I have this jar, I need to find the cap. So I start looking around all the kitchen, right? That's where I would first look. I would look around the dishes or counters or most common areas. If that's not where it is, well, now I have to formulate a new plan, right? So now I have to think about, okay, where could it possibly be? So then I start checking around the house. I start, you know, doing all that. Maybe my next step then is like, now I got to ask somebody who left the peanut butter jar out, right? Or if so, those are the things that you just organically do as a parent or as a teacher. You just kind of like, yep, I can solve this problem. I can do it. As students, they might see this and just not think if it's a problem, first of all, or they might say, or if you ask them to do the dishes or do something else, they might, yeah, hey, mom or dad, or, you know, or Jimmy or Johnny, my brothers, come help me out. I'm just lost, right? So it's part of that learning process that we're teaching students that how to be problem solvers and innovators and empower them to be problem solvers for the future, right? So they're not always relying on other pieces. They can be independent workers and be successful for later on in life. So if we go on to the next one, we can talk about the introduction to coding. So I like talking about this one because oftentimes when we talk about coding, things can kind of get miscombobulated. And so when we focus on coding, we're honing on that, we talk about it's being a form of communication. It's another language that we're essentially trying to teach our students, right? And so I always like to refer to the phrase that a professor once said to me, and I'll read it verbatim because it really kind of struck a chord with me, especially when you're teaching at the younger level. So it says, similar to how we have a language, computers also have a language. We use the alphabet and arrange letters to make words. Computers use binary code and arrange the code to make words they understand. We learn and arrange words into sentences to communicate and express ourselves. Computers learn and arrange binary code systematically and store data to communicate and express themselves. So you can hear really easily how that actually translates from our own written language with the letters and the alphabet, arranging them to make words and sentences to make sense. The same thing has to happen for a computer, right? It doesn't just magically do something, right? There's programming and coding involved. So when we say, hey, Alexa, can you play, this favorite song of mine? The computer has been programmed to recognize, one, your voice, two, what the song is, what you're trying to speak to it, and then gather that, and then three, output it back to you, right? There's a lot of programming and artificial intelligence evolved with that just one common sentence, and it's really technical. But that's something that we want to teach students at the younger level too, and you can do this by just explaining to them it is a form of communication or language. Just like other languages, there's rules for grammar, syntax, but there's also flexibility. It doesn't have to be just one set in stone. There's many programming languages out there. There's C++, there's JavaScript, etc. You don't have to know that, but there's differences just like our own world, right? There's Spanish, there's French, there's English. What is, how you spell color in the US is different than how you spell color in Canada. So all those different subtleties are different, and there's some flexibility in that. But as long as you learn the basics behind that, it's important to teach that when you're introducing coding. And then there's different, of course, many languages I was just speaking to, but that's what I really want to sum up to you, is that it's a language first, and you can teach us just like at the elementary level. Why is it so important to teach English reading and writing at the elementary level? Because they can absorb that information and make use of it. So the earlier you're able to introduce coding, the more impact that you can have for later on in life. All right. So that sets up the introduction. We're going to go to the next slide, and now we're going to get into more of the specifics of Matatalab. All right, so Matatalab is often referred to as coding like ABCs. It is really just that easy. You don't need any prior experience. It's a little information to be able to provide. It's picture oriented, not so much word based. It's sounds. And so I'm going to actually do a little bit of a top view here, just to kind of give you an introduction of what that actually looks like. So if we go here, and I'm going to try my best to get this all into the screen. So this is the actual platform that we're going to be using right here. There's a couple different components here. One is this tower that you see right here. So this tower, there's a little bulb right here that when you actually turn it on, it's actually going to make a sound, and it's going to turn blue. And it takes a while for it to boot up, but this tower is the communicator. All right, this is going to communicate everything to your robot, which is right here. And I don't know if you heard that or not, but that's the sound. And then you have your robot, which is now starting to flash blue because it now is trying to connect to your tower. The tower does have a little camera on here, on this little black piece right here. And the reason being is because when you set it up here on this tower, there's little tiles that you're able to put onto this board. And these boards just have their different functionality. So this is an arrow board where you can actually see it going forward. There's other little blocks here that you can see that it says turn left or turn right. And then you have also start and stop functions. So there's here that looks like an arrow, like you're pressing play. And there's those that like a circular that says stop. So the play is where you actually start code, and the stop is when you actually stop. And then so if you want the robot to go forward, all you have to do is see this little groove and connect it, and then place it on the board. So now that I know that I'm going forward, that I can go forward. I got numbers that can tell me how many times I want to go forward. But that's essentially all you have to do. And it's like a book. You're reading left to right. So you're building this up left to right for your students. So if you want to go forward, if you want to do multiple tiles, you can do multiple tiles, forward, forward, forward. Or you can go backwards. So again, this little groove will tell you what's forward, what's backwards. And then what you do is once you get your tiles set up and it's connected, you can get your mat or play area that you're going to be able to utilize it in. And it's definitely organized very nicely for you to be able to review. All these little images, basically you center where you are. You know the front of the robot is with these eyes. You're able to set it up and center it. And then when you're ready to go, all you have to do is hit play. And then it's going to be able to play your different your different code. Now, what I noticed is that I have had this on for a while, so I have to actually turn this back on for it to be able to connect to our actual tower. And then it's going to be able to, once it's finally connected, then you're going to be able to play your different code, okay? While you're doing this, what's really nice about it is they have little challenge books along the way to be able to help. Again, they're visually for you to be able to see. Very colorful again. So this one happens to be the same color of the actual map that you're actually designing. And then on the back side, it's going to show you how the actual instructions to be able to go from beginning to the end. So there's like this little orange dot right here that says this is where you start. You notice you're facing this way. The ending point is that little green flag right there. So you would just set up your little piece on here. So you would set up down here facing forward, and then your end goal would be this spot right here. Notice that he's facing here, so it'd just be forward once. You put the block for forward, you hit play, and then it would be able to work through this. On the very back side, you'll notice that it'll give you the actual answer. In this case, just one forward arrow. Then you would go to phase 2. And then it would again go to the next phase. So it's a progressing book to be able to help the students learn. Now, again, no words, all visual, very easy for the students to be able to pick up and be able to understand. And then at the very end of it, they eventually find the sequence of start adding additional blocks. And again, we're starting very basic right now. We're just directions, right? We're just starting directions. When we get into phase 2 booklet, then we can start building into other different functions, okay? So now we actually added some barriers. We do have red barriers that we can add to this platform if we want them to be able to go a certain path or a certain route. Beforehand, if we left the green flag here, we didn't have barriers. There's multiple different ways that we can go to this designated spot. But if we add barriers, now we're looking for more specific types of codes and programming for you to be able to solve this problem, right? And so you would build up your blocks, you would eventually progress up into this area. And then again, booklets have all the different designs. At first, it does all the directions. Now it adds numbers here. So there's these little numbers here, like 4, 2, 3. All that tells you is how many times you're going to go that certain direction. So if you go 4 2 times, if you have a 4 and you want to go forward, you place it underneath the forward button. And I'll put this back onto the front area so you can be able to view it. So notice now there's that blue number 4 under the forward. This would be able to go forward 4 times, right? All right, and then now notice I didn't start the code actually correctly. I should have done the start here for play the feature. But that's okay. And then basically after that too, you can say, yep, I want to play this function. I can stop this function, however you want to do it. And that is challenge 2. Challenge 3 then gets into a little bit more complex. So it progressively challenges the students and adds more functions and easy graphics. Again, no verbal directions, all visual to make it very easy for your students to be able to pick up. So again, this is just a very easy version of sequencing of the different kind of abilities that you can do. Again, it's very easy, place by place, turns, motors, etc. Now, say that you wanted to do the same activity without the product, right? Say that, you know what, this is great, Jordan. It's very easy. It's got tiles to show me front, back, side. You plug it in, it connects via this Bluetooth. You're able to hit play. Maybe I don't have the money to be able to fund for that. What you can do alternatively, if you look back down here at in front of me, I've actually created some other different tiles. So I've created a stop, I've created a go, I've created a jumping jack, I've created a run. You can create whatever kind of designs and just use movement. So if you want your students to introduce, before you even get into coding and start learning about the sequencing and computational thinking, you can actually start building different codes with movements. So if you want your students to start, when I say go, then I want you to start running in place. Or if I say go, I want you to run in place. And then when I say next, we're going to be doing jumping jacks. And at the very end, then we're going to stop. And we can do the same sequencing where we go left to right. So I say go, we're going to go the running in place, then I say next, we're going to be jumping jacking in place, and then we're going to say stop. We can even use these same movements and gestures to actually navigate a maze in the room with just the kids, right? So there's a lot of different capabilities to be able to adjust from building up to this sequence, or if you don't have Matatalab, ways that you can use coding or computational thinking for your everyday classroom. All right, so let's jump to the next slide. I'm going to jump into some of the different missions. So now that you've learned a little bit basics about Matatalab, it's very easy just using blocks, very easy for students, intuitive to be able to start building on and adding. I usually start anywhere from 3 to 4 year olds whenever I'm introducing this kind of product to students. And I started the very, very basics first, talking about language, and then building that up into different actually codes and understanding like their own name and say, for example, my son Lucas, L-U-C-A-S. Well, what does that mean? Why does letters L-U-C-A-S sound like Lucas, the phonetic meaning of it and the syntax of it? So then you start building into actually formulas. So if Simon Says is another great example of starting getting students to think about that next steps, one step at a time, especially with the younger ones. As you get older, you can build right into it pretty quickly and get students started thinking about that. On the slide that I have there in front of you, these are just some challenges that you can use with the product, Matatalab, but you don't have to necessarily use this exact one. This happens to be the robotics competition that they do for space. There's 3 different tasks to have. This is mission 1. The actual design of the mat right there on the right-hand side of the screen, that is something that they actually build. And the students actually would build this, and then as they're the rocket ship, as their Matatalab would move up, then it would play different sounds as it reached different marks. And notice the red, the yellow, and the green, I believe that is. Those are the different sounds they make until it gets to the finish line. So that would be the complete mission 1. There'd be certain points evaluated for that one. If you go to the next slide, then you would do mission 2. A slight different variation, again, focusing on space, going around Earth, just like you're trying to revolve around the Earth. And so again, different point values, different kind of setup for this. And these are things that even if I don't go over them specifically, you can use different variations of this for your own classroom, because you'll have this slide deck as a presentation afterwards as well. If we go to the next slide, then it's mission 3. Now we're going to actually try to dock onto the space station. So not only are they going to use Matatalab and focus on using this, now they're going to attach magnets to it and see if they can emulate docking to a station. So this is just one example of incorporating some science, some coding aspects to it, but you can certainly add this to your neighborhoods. You can use the match for different environments. There's a lot of different things that you can create for your Matatalab to be able to navigate. All right, so then let's go to the next slide. These are the different products that you would have available. These are kits that you can certainly purchase if you wanted to. There's individual kits, and then there's classroom sets with curriculum. Now there are curriculum, if you want to focus on me a little bit closer on the screens, there are learning guides here that I've demonstrated right here for you. These are guides that we do sell individually. I'm going to have them in the PowerPoint as well, but it really is good creative lessons that you can use, and it kind of gives you the overview of each of these. So what are the basic blocks? What are the advanced blocks? As you build into this, what are we going to be doing? Then it starts to build lessons into the introduction. Again, just like we did with some of these challenge booklets, we're going to actually build some lessons with cross-curricular activities aligned to standards right here as well. So these are some curriculum books that could go along with these kits. There's a light kit that you see right there on the left-hand side. That's a little bit different. You're going to have a tower just like you normally would, but instead of having this board in front of you, they're going to have an actual device that's on top of Matatalab. So just like we have with this version right here, this top is magnetic and it comes right off. And the reason we do that is because there's an upgrade that you can add a sensor to it. So these actually have a variety of different sensors on it. If you want to detect the distance, light, etc., you can do that and add that to that. So that's what the light version is. It has this sensor, it has one of the robots that it can move, and then it has a tower because the tower communicates to your sensor. All right, and then the robot is able to act out that instead of having a board. So it's just a different alternative product if you're interested in that. They do charge. This is a common question, how to charge this. Just a common USB port. So I have just one that I just use from home because I have an iPhone. And then that's all you would need to be able to connect to it. The tower takes longer to charge than the actual robot. Robots are about an hour. These guys are about 3 hours, just to kind of give you a sense of how long they would be able to utilize the different robots. If you go to the next slide, then we're going to get into more of the curriculum that I was just speaking to. These are just the different guides that you can available. There's different add-ons to this. So not only do you get to the basics of, hey, functions of moving forward, backwards, left, right, turns, repeats. Then you also have a couple of different cues too. You have a moving faster phase, and then you have a music phase. There's actually a specific add-on for actual specific music if you want to get more involved with actual notes and coding that way. There's actually an add-on for the different sensors. If you're talking about the artistics, so there's a little actual device right here in the middle that's kind of open under the robot. You can actually put a marker in there and then actually begin to draw shapes and figures with your robot as well. So not only do you get to learn about the coding, but then you get some artistic value too. So if you do this top screen, and I'll let you just kind of see this a little bit. I don't know if you can see this. So what I have here is a square and a triangle. And so when I'm doing a lesson, I would take a picture of this is how I want to actually, this is how I actually create our shape. And I can use this as this assessment component. So I have right here, I have my square. So if I start my figure and I repeat it 4 times with my loop, that's what these are for the loop. If you want to figure, so as a start for the green, I'm going to go forward, then right, and then stop, then repeat, forward, right, then stop, repeat, forward, right, then stop, repeat, forward, right, stop, repeat. So then eventually you're able to build shapes and designs with all your different figures. And so I've just built some basic designs here. This is a great way exercise where I will have the shape here. I'll have this open on the left side. The students can take their picture if they can do that, or they can draw the different shapes or designs of how they would solve their problem. And this is just a great exercise that they can do beyond just having them code with the block pieces. Now they can incorporate the designs of shapes and figures and become more of like artists. All right, then if we go to the next slide, we're going to talk about the other different add-ons and the pricing for those. Actually, no, sorry, the scope and sequence. So for these guides, each one of these guides have a scope and sequence of the different materials that they're going to actually cover. In this case, this is focusing on the learning station curriculum. So learning station being referring to this station where you have all the different blocks. This is everything that it covers. And so they actually have the scope and sequence for each of those different curriculums. So if you are interested, I can send you those. On the next slide, then we get into those add-ons. So these are the add-ons that you can have. The music, the artists. We have a sensor one specific where you can have just the top. So say you bought the basic set, then you want to add the sensors where you can actually detect distance and light, etc. You can do that as well. If you go to the next slide, then we are going to talk about the things that we want to consider. So I know I'm kind of going through these a little bit quicker, but I want to make sure to cover everything that we have here for today. Some of the things that I want you to consider when you're actually building this is that what's not important is the actual language or a computer language, but how to teach students how to solve a problem with code. So out in the real world, like I was just saying in the very beginning, there's C++, there's JavaScript, there's all these different programming language. You don't know where your students are going to end up. So you really want to start teaching them how to solve problems with code versus saying, hey, this is the language that you have to use and this is exactly how you do it, right? So that might change and it might vary. So it's very important to consider that whenever you're trying to teach students in the very beginning of how to code. Then we could talk about the programming languages and how they come and go. Students will adapt. Well, so will you in that circumstance, right? You will adapt to this. You don't know maybe know all the computer language out there, but you can start teaching the fundamental skills of coding with something similar to this, where it's just blocks, images, verbal commands that can get students thinking about that step-by-step procedure of understanding how it will actually be good. And then teaching good programming habits trumps teaching a popular language, right? You'll hear out there like, hey, when should I start using or switching over from text-based or block coding to text-based coding? Or maybe what is the best language out there to teach or the most popular? Don't jump on that bandwagon. Start learning about the fundamentals first before you start learning about that back end stuff, because when you set up students for the right mindset, with that growth mindset of understanding the coding in the very beginning, then it can start translating into more and more. It gets them engaged at the earlier level, and then you say, yeah, when it gets in that technical text-based coding, then they can start really picking up on that because they understand that step-by-step procedure first. And it's just like the example that I like to give about the like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So one way to start off an activity first with students, and I like using just peanut butter jelly because everybody knows it, is I want students to write out a step-by-step procedure of how they would actually create a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. All right, so I would allow 5 minutes for the students to be able to do this. As the students are working, I would kind of look around, see who's writing. Some students might think, oh, 3 steps, I'm done, right? And oftentimes that is the case, right? They think, well, there's 3 cases. You grab your jar of peanut butter, you spread the peanut butter on the one slice of bread, you grab your jelly, you spread the jelly on the bread, and then you just put the sandwich together and you have your sandwich. Well, I like to stop students right away. Right when they first say, well, grab the jar of peanut butter, I'd be like, stop. All right, what is a jar of peanut butter? And they'd be like, well, a jar of peanut butter is just peanut butter. It comes in a circular form. I'm like, okay, so now that you've explained what a jar of peanut butter is, now I know that, so now I have to grab it. So what am I grabbing it with? So these are all the things that the computers don't know, right? So if you think about that, a computer doesn't know what a jar of peanut butter is. A computer doesn't know what a hand is. We have to teach computers how to actually process and interact with our world around them. So that's why they have sensors, right? They have that visual cue. Just like this tower here from Matatalab has that camera to look at the blocks that says, hey, I've been programmed to look at these blocks, and if these blocks are in a specific order, or they're a certain shape or color or size, I recognize that as commands of what to tell my robot to do and react with. So that's the same thing that we do. And it's not necessarily to prove the student's wrong. That's not what I'm trying to get at. We don't want to say, no, you're wrong. No, we want to start getting them to think about, how does this relate to a computer, and how does the language that we speak just a normal day-to-day also translate to a computer's world? So we have to really get them in the framework and the mindset of, this is how a computer makes understanding of our world. When we talk about automation vehicles, I think that's a crazy feat. They're starting to make vehicles that actually can drive and propel themselves. You don't need any drivers. And you can bet you there are sensors to the 9 on that thing. It's reading people, shapes, figures. It understands how much weight it has, if it actually has passengers in it. I mean, it is decked out with all kinds of sensors, and there's lots and lots of data that's involved with accumulating just to know that there aren't variances, so it's safe, 1, on the road, and 2, that that people can actually trust this vehicle to get them to point A to point B without actually getting in any kind of accidents. And mind you, computers also have to keep in mind the variances of other people on the road, right? If someone swerves, how does my vehicle react? Or how does our computer understand that, hey, I might have to adjust what I'm doing to avoid an accident? So there's a lot of things involved with that. So that's why it's so important to teach good habits versus the programming language. And then I also have the 3 before me. The 3 before me, I like to have this just because I want to empower students. Now, you might have those students that come to you saying, hey, Mr. Nelson, I have a problem with this. Hey, Mr. Nelson, I have a problem with this. Hey, I'm Mr. Nelson. Well, if you have 20 or plus students in your class that are constantly doing that, you're going to have a lot of maybe frustration or lost time because they're not trying to be problem solvers. We're trying to empower them to be problem solvers. So I always do this ask 3 before me. 1, it might be the Google search or do some research to see if they can solve the problem themselves. So that might be step 1. Step 2, ask a sibling or a parent or somebody in the household. That might be step 2. And step 3 is maybe you want to start talking to a peer or another classmate to see if they can solve that problem. So let them go through those phases to help them solve these problems. Same thing you can relate to coding, right? If we're having trouble with it, maybe I need to do some more research about how does this actually function? How does it get to work? If it's started not working appropriately, where I think it's going forward, but it's actually going backwards, what am I doing wrong, right? So maybe I can ask a parent, a peer, to be able to help solve those problems. Other things that you want to consider on the next slide is understand the why. Why are we teaching robotics? Why is this so important? Just like any lesson, any kind of curriculum that we're following, school districts, as you know, do a lot of research and try to use best practices to help teach their students, right? We have these standards that we have to align to. It has to meet to certain objectives. So why do we want to teach robotics, right? So the why is technology is advancing and it's coming more and more prevalent in our homes, everyday life. Our phones are computers. We use computers every day. This video conference and how we communicate each other is happening. We have a lot of Alexas and other Google products that we use to be able to interconnect our smart devices. So from our phone, we can turn on our lights or we can unlock our houses. This technology is being used more and more. With that technology being used more and more are more jobs and more career paths that students can use. And if they're exposed to it early on, at their early grade levels, and they're engaged and they're excited about it, that sticks with them that maybe, hey, this might be something I want to do later on in life. So that's the why. There's more careers and jobs out there, and there's a need for it. Not everybody knows how to use a computer, right? The back end of it, right? There's IT for a reason. Not everybody can do that skill specifically, but it's a highly needed skill. We all say technology is great. Well, it's great until it doesn't work, right? Well, now it doesn't work. Now, 9 times out of 10, most people are like, hey, IT, I need a problem. Imagine if you could problem solve everything that you could do right in person. You wouldn't need IT. You can just say, yeah, okay, that's an error message. Maybe it's because of X, Y, and Z. Well, if you know that information, it becomes more independent. You become more robust and more better at learning those opportunities and teaching your students. Then we can talk about making robotics for kids into a game. We obviously want to make it fun, right? We don't want those engaging lessons to kind of turn sour or become boring for the kids. So we want to do something that is active, like a fun. So hey, in the beginning, let's run in place. Let's play Simon Says. Let's make it into a game that's interactive. But don't you know that you're actually listening to commands in sequence? If Simon says sit down, Simon says stand up. And then if you don't say Simon Says, well, that Simon Says is like a computer understanding that I have to run this. If it doesn't have it, it doesn't make sense. So that's how you can easily translate that game to coding. Then we could talk about creating a robotics club for kids. So if you don't have it already, maybe you want to start it for kids. Maybe you want to have the after school program. Maybe you don't need a Matatalab, or maybe you need one just unit. You can do a video conference and then get them to show, and then they can say, hey, Mr. Nelson, I think that if you go forward 3 times, you're going to be able to solve that challenge or be able to navigate that maze. Let me put that into my little deck here. Let me hit start. Does it actually work? Yes, great. Now we know that we solved that problem. So you can do this remotely. You can do this in person. There's a lot of different variances that you can be able to do. All you need is several different camera angles to be able to do maybe top down or if on person, etc. I take pictures too of all the different codes that I use for my little personal key. There's a lot of different things there as well. I did have a question that came in. It says, how easy can this be for a student with autism to play? Concentration problems, etc. Great question. So one of the things that I've noticed sometimes with robotics is people that aren't engaged in your normal activities might capture to something that makes a sound or interacts with them, engages with them. I've actually done a robotics club with somebody that had autism issues, a little bit of sensory, couldn't communicate very well, but that actually was able to work with that student and they actually excelled a lot better than other students in this. Sometimes it takes a different kind of framework or thinking. My brother also has autism, and I don't think of it as something as a setback, but it's something that they can use to help actually engage them that otherwise other instruction couldn't. So if I engage a language arts lesson, for instance, and I'm talking about building their name, maybe I have them spell their name on a board. I have letters, right? And I want them to say, get the robot to actually spell their name for them. Well, a student that might be able to see this, engage with, say, hey, that's kind of neat, that's different. No one's talking to me, but I'm learning about this. And then they get to be able to spell their name with this robot and engage with them. Sometimes it's a little bit easier for them where otherwise this person-to-person interaction, that sometimes happens. Another question is, do you have kids for remote learning? Yeah, so I've worked with sometimes kids remotely. I know it is sometimes more of a challenge depending on internet connectivity and things of that nature. So when you're working with students like this, I like to pre-build some different activities, whether I'm using my own little scripts of, hey, go start to build the sequencing and blocks, or I can use the product like Matatalab that I can start using that. If you want to talk about more specifics, we can jump on a one-on-one conference call and be able to walk through some different activities that you can use to engage students. But yeah, you can certainly use remote learning with these different product and or different activities as well. Another question came in, says, can this help a student with their eye-hand coordination? Eye-hand coordination. It can to a certain degree. One thing that I would say is that they have to understand that there's certain blocks that they have to use. So if they're talking about distance and understanding that, hey, if I put a block for forward or backwards, etc., and I put it in a certain square and I hit go, what does that actually do? I'm actually seeing physically what that actually is, those different movements, especially for their different blocks that you actually create. This is another good one. So maybe you have a grab feature that they have to go and grab a key, and then from the key, then they know they have to take that steps to unlock something. So now they're using their hand-eye coordination to actually unlock something or turn something, or so there's different ways that you can incorporate hand and eye coordination in there, depending on what you're using and how you're using it. But yeah, you certainly could use it for that as well. All right, continuing on. I did want to mention as well, there is something that I like to do too. So remember in the mission where they had to create their own mat. Well, for students, they can create their own mat. They're 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters. If they know how to use a ruler, I actually have a specific ruler, just wait 1 second, that has just strictly centimeters on it, right? And so this actually helps me say, okay, these are centimeters. It only has centimeters on that, so I know that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm able to measure that out and create a square with 10 centimeters. But as you know, not every student can use a ruler, right? So what I do to help with that is use a grid template. So I use like a cardboard cutout like this. I've measured 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters. So all the students have to do is take a marker and draw this. Now, you don't want to make it too skinny because otherwise it becomes flimsy. This is a little bit more robust. And then it's just my grid template. So if you look from the top camera and you look down here, you're going to notice that each one of these little grid templates is here. So I would draw my here, and you'll notice that there's a little bit white outside. I use like a chisel tip marker to be able to use that little distance, about that distance there. And then our robot sits in the middle of that frame right there in the picture. So then I would draw my frame here, I draw my frame here, and now I've created 2 squares. And then you can draw pictures, you can draw designs, letters, numbers, however you want to do it. And then you can just build out a mat however big you want using paper. 8.5 by 11. If you want to do a poster board, you can certainly do that. So then you can kind of custom design any kind of mats you want, and any student can do it with a grid template. So these are come in handy whenever you're trying to build like a Matatalab specific. I just like to use a grid template for those. And then keep it simple yet engaging. I can't emphasize that enough. If you're jumping feet first into this, bless you, I love you. That's okay. That's how I learned, but not everybody likes to do that. So I would like to simplify this by saying, hey, I'll look at the booklet challenge, the very first one. I'll look at the very first couple there, and I'll start at the very basics. And that's after I've taught them about what is coding, why is it a language, how does that relate to engagement of learning about words and numbers, etc. So that's how I kind of start off with that and then build up there. So just remember, keep it simple, very basic when you first. Younger students might get frustrated a little bit quicker, especially if there's like special education needs, etc. And then you might do more of like a one-on-one with them first to kind of introduce it. And then as you notice, they'll kind of gravitate more towards independent learning, that they'll say, oh, I understand that now, I can do that step by step. And then give them a couple challenges, see how that goes, and then build it up from there. All right, let's go to the next slide. Last thing I want to mention too is you can show emotions with this. So one of the big components right now is social emotional learning, right? Well, elementary students, a lot of them are having troubles with emotions, expressing emotion. So what you can do with robots, and I have a couple examples there. That's just one robot that I made into like a little monster. And again, it scales. I use Legos. That's just a Lego compatible robot that's called a MeeperBot. But I also made faces there. And so those faces, I actually have a little template that I'm going to send out to everybody. You can actually use right here too. So I have a little template that I'll send to you guys. There's females, there's males, different ages. Sometimes they're bald, mustache, glasses. I like to express some different emotions that they might not necessarily see, like seeing a boy cry. Not everybody thinks boys cry, so I like to emphasize that, because I think that it's important that men and women alike have the same kind of emotions, and it's okay to express those feelings. So that's why I kind of added that there. So if you go back to the slide deck, those are just a couple of different faces that you can use if you want to, but you can use emotions with this. So even with Matatalab, you could put some of these faces on Matatalab saying, hey, George goes to the market and he's really happy about that. But then what happens is, you know, he actually tripped, he fell and he hurt his knee. So George is actually now sad. So the robot goes to the market. When on the way there, he actually fell, you change the face, he's now sad. Well, what would make George happy now? Well, maybe we want to go to the ice cream store. So maybe you made a sequence of him going to the ice cream store. Yes, I love ice cream. Now I'm happy, right? So now we're starting to talk about emotions, feelings, and how that it can incorporate with robotics as well. And that's important, especially at the elementary level, even in the middle school and high school level, even when they think like, hey, I'm too cool for that or whatever. You know, it's good to show that the different emotions and expressions and feelings and incorporate that sometimes with the robotics as well. All right, and then the last slide, these are some different projects that you can do. I've actually added some links, and these are specific to Matatalab, but it kind of gives you the idea of some different activities that maybe you want to try out with your students. So there's a soccer activity, ages 5 to 7. If you click on there, you can certainly do that soccer activity with Matatalab. If you don't, maybe you want to make some of your own building blocks to say, hey, this is how it would work if we're actually building a soccer exercise, or how might alter that, or how would a student go about solving that problem, right? Just going through that engineering design process or cycle, how do you solve this problem and coding with building blocks? And maybe they can create their own. Maybe they can work in pairs, in groups, maybe it's independently, however. And just so there's just a couple of different options. I did have the building phases and the curriculum samples. I will be giving some samples of this curriculum just to kind of give you an idea of what that looks like as well to Matatalab, but I just wanted to make sure that you have some additional resources from this workshop. The last slide, I think, is the last one for questions, comments, feedback. I didn't give you my name. My name is Jordan Nelson. I'm a customer engagement manager at Nasco. I feel like that's secondary. I think information is first, but I'm also a resource and tool for you as well. Nasco Education provides a lot of different live webinars. That resource center that says there, nascoeducate.com, that's where we actually house all of our webinars. So just like this one we're recording right now, we're sending out, anything we record is going to be housed there. So if you want to see topics on STEM education, blended learning, makerspace, there's language arts specific, math specific, science specific, all of those different webinars that we've done in the past are housed there. So you can go to that website, you can sign up for a free account to be able to see that a little bit, but I wanted to offer that as a resource as well. And then too, if you have any additional questions too, I'm going to be able to check right now on the tab. It says, are we sharing the slides with us? Yes, absolutely. I want you to be able to have these slides as a reference point to be able to say, yep, I can look at the resources, I can look at the links. If I wanted Matatalab, maybe I want the Pro coding set, or maybe I want the Matatalab Lite. Maybe I want a different add-on, maybe because I want to focus on music or on the art side. You can certainly do that as well, and that's all referenced within the slide deck. So I'm going to do the slide deck to you guys. I'm going to give you samples to the curriculum guides. I'm going to give you the face template, and then you're going to be able to have all the documents that you need from this workshop. Now, again, I know I kind of went through things a little bit fast. This was higher level. I didn't get into too specific of actually using Matatalab. I apologize. There's going to probably be a series where I'm actually going to start developing challenges. It's going to kind of take those next steps. This is more of like an introduction of, hey, if I want to start coding right now with early learners, what can I do? What are some strategies I can use? And these are some different strategies. I wanted to really focus and hone in on that so then you guys can be set up for success, even if you are teaching remotely. If you're looking for different ideas of how you can incorporate that too, say you don't have the budget for this now, but maybe there's something in the future, I could temporarily maybe help you with some different ways to start implementing that now and getting prepared. So maybe at summer school, you want to launch something maybe remotely, or maybe even at the next school year you want to, because in all honesty, we don't know what it's going to be like. So it's good to plan ahead and be proactive, because there still might be some circumstances where you have some students in person, some students remotely, or one or the other. So any other questions that we might have? I definitely want to make sure to address those. I'm not seeing at this time, but again, if you do want to reach out to me, my contact information is engage@nascoeducation.com. The name is Jordan Nelson. My main focus is STEM solutions, but I also like incorporating arts. I like to incorporate the language arts. I like to incorporate the math, the science, social studies, other different activities that you can use to incorporate, whether it's robotics, whether making it cross-curricular, or make it interdisciplinary where you're working with multiple teachers. I love that kind of stuff all the time. So I don't think I have anything else on my agenda. I do have some fun little interactive pieces here that Matatalab has. So if you want to make sure to kind of show how you can show some different personalities, you can certainly do this. This is just a little add-on too, if you want to make them little cute, little add-ons. Some people like emojis and things like that. There's these little add-ons too to make little figurines. So if you want to make like little animals or things like that, this is just happens to be another add-on if you want to include that with Matatalab. And like I said, there are markers too. I didn't bring these out, but these are going to be added on. These are going to be part of a potential next series where you can able to put these little thin markers right here, and then I'm going to show and demonstrate how you can use them to draw and things of that nature. So I don't see any other questions. Like I said, I want to make sure you make good use of your time and to introduce coding to early learners. Like I said, start with those good habits, teach early, understand the why we're doing this, and make a really effort for the students. Because if they see you're motivated, you're excited about this, it's going to just naturally gravitate towards that subject. And how you phrase it too, just like if you say, oh, I'm not good at math. Well, sometimes students think, well, if they say they're not good at math, maybe I'm not good at math. Or they say they're not good at coding, I'm not good at coding. So just be careful about what you say to your students, because it does make an impact to them. And anything that they struggle with or have difficulty learning with can be taught. It just takes a little bit longer time sometimes, right? And so you got to be patient. You got to work with students, because there's going to be some pitfalls if you're launching it for the first time and you're like, you know what, that did not go well. Well, what went wrong? What can I do to adjust it? You're self-reflecting all the time. I did that all the time when I was in the classroom. So just take those strategies, learn from it. And two, if you're looking for some ideas or ways to work with students, let me know and I see if I can help you. I don't have any other questions, so I guess thank you for your time. Thank you for joining me for this webinar. Again, if you have anything else or needs, comments, etc., make sure to follow up with me. There is a survey after this. Fill that out for me. That's going to help me understand what your needs are. Also, maybe some different future webinars. And then you also will get a recording of this session afterwards as well. So thank you so much. Have a good rest of your day and a good rest of your weekend. Take care, everybody.